All your social media sites are pushing towards short-term video. In other words, a photograph like you would see on Instagram traditionally isn't as popular with the algorithms as short clips are, short video clips. And so what's one of the best ways to get some really epic short clips on your Instagram walls and Facebook walls and all your social media pages that everyone's pushing towards more video? Time lapses or hyperlapses. So I wanted to teach you how to do a time lapse with your GoPro, because that's probably the most common camera between all of us that we have, especially for this kind of material. I think this will definitely work on all the newer GoPros. The settings are fairly much the same. Let's talk about the two different ways of doing time lapses. That is through the actual photos that you take, where it takes a bunch of photos and then later you take those photos to your computer and stitch them together in some type of program. I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. The other way is to just shoot a video mode time lapse. A video time lapse is basically the GoPro just shoots video and then speeds it up for you. So let's go to the settings and we're just gonna scroll to the right, get on, and you can see there time lapse. And we're gonna go down here, touch custom, and we're gonna go to, these are just saved presets. You can set those up any way you'd like. This is a cool setting right here in case you're not aware of, scheduled capture. So you can set your GoPro up and then set the time and it'll come on automatically at that time and start the time lapse. Here's your interval. We'll talk more about that in a second, but the first thing we wanna look at is format. And so you have photo, like we were just talking about. And then if you go down, you have video. We're gonna start with a video time lapse, although which one you should use will basically be determined by what kind of quality you're looking for. If you're looking for some really good quality time lapse video, I mean, where you can edit it, it has a lot of depth, and you can really get the most out of it, you're gonna wanna do photo. Okay, so now you can pick your resolution, just like you would with any video. We're gonna go 4K, and I like for landscapes, we're just gonna kind of keep it linear. Interval, we're gonna go 1 second. And the interval basically is determined by the motion in your scene. The motion in this scene is gonna be clouds. And so clouds move a little slower, so you can get a little longer interval. I could go out 2 seconds probably, but we're gonna do 1 second just to show you what we're dealing with here. No limit, it's just gonna keep shooting until I turn it off, and we're ready to go. So let's go ahead and shoot a time lapse, 1 second interval, and see what we end up with. So that looks pretty good, right? The motion is just smooth, the clouds are, I mean, it's just perfect. I think that 1 second interval truly fits this scene wonderfully. However, you can see the dynamic range issues we have. We have lots of darks in the foreground, and then up in the clouds we have lights, and that is hard to edit in post-processing without creating a lot of noise. So that's why photo may be a better option at times. So let's go ahead and try one with a little bit longer interval. Let's take it to 5 seconds and see how that goes. And to get the time lapse to start, just back out of the menus and hit the shutter button on top. So what you need to be aware of with any time lapse is the fact that you need plenty of time. Depending on how long you want the clip to be, well, that depends on how much time it's going to take. How many time lapses do you want to do? It can take up a good part of a day, and you also want to, get the best conditions possible to show the movement. Time lapses have to have good movement. We're getting ready to wrap up this 5-second interval. And what the GoPro's doing is it's literally taking snapshots every 5 seconds, and then it's gonna stitch it into a video automatically. And so what you'll notice is everything looks a lot faster. It's not necessarily jumpy, but it's getting on the edge of it. All right, a little bit of a new scene, and now we're gonna try the photo mode. Now we're in photo mode, photo, raw. If you do raw, you're gonna have the most depth. When I say depth, I mean you're gonna have more detail in raw, a whole lot more detail, which means you're gonna be able to edit more in depth. You're gonna be able to bring out colors, you're gonna be able to bring up shadows or take them down. Same thing with highlights. It's gonna be a lot easier to edit when you're in raw. Now the minimum interval when you're doing photo is 5 seconds. So now we have no limit, so it's gonna take photos until I tell it to stop. Right now we have 12 frames. So what you wanna do is take the length of time lapse that you want and multiply it times 24. I'd say a good time lapse is somewhere between 5 and about 8 seconds or so. And you wanna stay on the long end of that so that you have a little bit of space in case you need to edit, you need to cut out the beginning or cut out the end. And while the speed is a little faster for this scene than I prefer, the colors are much more forgiving and much bolder. For our next time lapse, we're gonna do the photo method, but with a 10-second interval. And just to kind of compare the movement of the clouds. This is just a beautiful scene. I can't turn it down as far as doing a time lapse. Let's see how it turns out. Here you can see the movement is very fast, and a lot of this has to do with your creative artistic touch. What are you looking for that scene? What kind of movement are you looking for? And being able to anticipate what it's going to look like when it comes to the final product. So let me walk you through this, exactly how I would do this. And we're going to start right from the import of the SD card. Inside my Lightroom folder, I create a folder called time lapse. And then it's just a blank folder. And then I go in and I add the different time lapses that I'm editing. So here in lapse 1 is the first time lapse I'm gonna edit. And then here in lapse 2 is the second time lapse I'm gonna edit. And you can see when I click into it, here are all the raw photos, 240 of them, I believe. And same thing in lapse 2, which is a different time lapse I'm gonna do, all the raw photos. And during this time lapse, the camera actually fell. And so what I'm gonna need to do here is delete the frames that I don't want in the time lapse, and you can see the differences here. After we get those folders created and our photos from the SD card inside, we go to Lightroom. And here you can see the two folders, lapse 1 and lapse 2. And I've imported them into Lightroom. Now we're gonna go into the develop module. And here you can see our photos are along the bottom. Now what we're gonna do is go to the very first photo, and we're gonna make the edit on this first photo. And these need to be Lightroom edits rather than like a third party like Lumiere or other edit software where you can send the picture into that software, do some more editing, and then send it back into Lightroom. These need to be Lightroom native edits, because what we want to do is edit the first one and then copy and paste them to all of the rest. And if you use a third party plugin, it's not going to be able to copy those settings that you make or those changes that you make on that edit. So make sure these are Lightroom native edits that you're making on this photo. And I'm not going to go through the editing process. I'm going to edit it real quick. We'll come right back and look at the next step. Before I finish this up, this also includes the crop. Whatever crop you make in Lightroom and whatever aspect ratio you choose, it's going to copy that as well if you allow it. And what I mean by if you allow it, well, let me show you exactly, because we're to that point. I'm gonna go ahead and level this picture out, and I'm just gonna use the mountaintops for a reference. Click done, and now my first photo is the way that I want it. You can see the second photo doesn't look anything like that. Back to the first. And so what I need to do is copy this edit to all of these photos. And in order to do that, I keep the first photo highlighted, and then I'm gonna scroll all the way to the last photo of this time lapse, and I think that's gonna be 240. Yeah, right here.
And so what I'm gonna do is hold down the shift key and click that last one. And what you saw happen there is all the photos along the bottom became highlighted. And there's this little button here that you probably don't pay a whole lot of attention to in Lightroom very often, and it's called sync. So it's gonna take that edit, and here's the parts of that edit, all of the individual parts, including the crop. And you're choosing which parts of this edit on the first photo that you want to sync with all the rest of the photos. And I don't really have a reason to not sync all of them, so I'm gonna leave all checked, or make sure check all is pressed, and then we're gonna hit synchronize. You can see in the top left, real quick there, it synced the settings, the edit of that first photo across all 240 photos, and it did it pretty quick. Okay, so what we wanna do is make sure that they're all selected again. So click the first photo, scroll to the end, to the last photo, which is 240, shift, and then select the last photo. They're all selected again. Now we're gonna go up to File and Export. And so the folder, what I wanna do is I wanna give you a little tip here, and that is, if we can get in. Okay, so here is time-lapse 1. That's the one we're working on. Go into that folder, click New Folder, and then title it something like Edit. Ooh, if I can spell correctly. There we go. And so this way you have some organization to know that the photos in this folder are the edited photos. And you're gonna click Choose, and when it comes to the rest of these settings, that's kind of up to you. It's just like a normal export. But the thing that I want you to pay attention to here is this area right here, custom name sequence. And we need to make sure that this is checked, because when we bring these photos into the next step, that's important. And so we're gonna start with the custom text time-lapse, and what it's gonna do is that first photo is gonna be time-lapse 1, the next one's gonna be time-lapse 2, and it's just gonna automatically do that. Make sure the rest of your settings are right. And you don't want any, I would suggest not put any watermarking or anything that can kind of take away from the time lapse. But now we're gonna go ahead and hit export. It's preparing to export, and you're gonna see up here in the top left, exporting 240 files. And so it's going to take a little bit of time to do that. It could take anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. I'm gonna let this do its thing, and then I'll come back to you and show you the next step. Lightroom is done editing. Now it's time for the next step, which is to take these final photos into whatever video editing software that you use. I use Premiere Pro. I think it's the easiest way to do it. All right, here we go. So now let's import our clips. So we're inside of the Lapse 1 folder, the parent folder. And now I'm going to go to the raw photos are here, and then the edited photos. You see how this really makes a difference now? So now we go into the edited photos, and we're gonna select them all. We do this the same way you do it in Lightroom. You select the top one, and then you scroll to the bottom. Hold Shift down, and now they're all selected. And now we'll go ahead and click Import. And now you see what's happened here is it's taken all of those photos and it's stacked them on a timeline in a 38-minute timeline. Before we do anything else, let's make sure our settings are where we want them. We're gonna put this at 23.9. This is preference, but I like that look of that 23.976 frames per second. And here we go. So now the first step is to go ahead and select all of the photos. And then we're gonna right click, and we're going to go to speed and duration. And right now this is set to, each clip is gonna be on screen for about 9 seconds. So what we wanna do is change that to 1 frame. So we're gonna go 0 seconds, 0, 1. So that's 1 frame. And then we're gonna make sure ripple edit is checked, click OK. And this is gonna shrink the, wow, look, it went from 30 some minutes down to probably, where are we at? Somewhere around 24 seconds or so. So now let's kind of take a look at what we have. It's looking very choppy. I think maybe we have an issue. Let's check our duration. Okay. Somehow it got set to 3. So we're gonna set that back to 1. And that should shrink it even more. There we go, that looks better. Now to get this to run a little smoother, we're gonna select all the photos and we're gonna click nest. And that's nested them into one video. We're gonna click in, and we're gonna click out with I and then O. And we're gonna render this part so that we can see what it looks like. Render into out. And we're almost done, and here we go. And now with this, you can do some, creative effects. Like, let's do the clouds are moving to the right part of the screen. So let's start the time lapse zoomed in at about, say, 125, set a keyframe, and go to the end of the clip. And we'll draw that scale back to 100 so that it has a zooming out type of an effect. And let's take a look at the speed as well. So now we're gonna see that motion I put in there. You can see we have that motion in there now. Now, I think the clouds are moving a little fast. So I wanna slow that down just a little bit. So we're gonna go to speed and duration. And let's just drag it out a little bit. Let's make it 10 seconds or so, which is about 78%. I am gonna click optimal flow because that's gonna blend everything a little smoother. And now we're gonna need to probably render again. Oh yeah, there we go. That's beautiful. There's many ways to do time lapses. I'm just showing you the way that I think is the simplest, but the way that gives you the best quality is with the photo method. The video method definitely has its application. Anytime you're just trying to capture some time with some movement, and it really doesn't matter if it's perfect versus great, then go with the video method. It's much easier and it will look good most of the time. And like I said in the video, the one thing you need to be careful of is when there's dynamic range. When there's a lot of lights as well as a lot of darks, you really should consider going with the photo method in those applications. I hope you guys got something out of the video. Do me a favor and share it with your family, friends. That would mean a lot to me. That's how the channel grows. I hope you guys have a great week, and I can't wait to see you on the next episode.